In this video, we're going to cover off the functions that we've added into the platform to help you more easily model the duration and frequency of work through the process that you've captured. So that means how long do actions take and how often do they happen? This process here, super simple. We create a new account, creating content such as name and address. And there are a couple of validation loops, so some rework that we go through in order to ultimately get to a customer account, which is going to be in our CRM. So we need to come to the capture action. These are really important because these are the actions that define the volume of work flowing through the model. So these, if you like, inject content into our process. So on the left-hand side, with my capture action selected, you can see I have a red statement missing frequency. Click here. So we'll click and open the calculator for duration frequency. So how long does it take? Let's say 10 minutes. How often does it happen? Let's say 10 times each workday for 52 weeks of the year. So when I hit save here, you can see that on the left-hand side, the statement has turned green, 10 each workday, with each taking 10 minutes. And to make this simple for us to follow, I'm going to come up to show labels and click processed. So this is showing me now the number of items that are processed through the model. And if we just relay it out, we'll have a bit more space to be able to read things. So I have 2,600 of these events taking place, creating 2,600 names, addresses, and email addresses. But then you'll come up here to the validation action, and you can see it's jumped to 7,800, which is 2,600 times 3. This may be a valid frequency of work. If we have to validate the name and the address and the email address, we're touching 7,800 pieces of information. But that might not be the case. This could be a single line in a spreadsheet, and you look at all three of those things, and the action takes a period of time. We still think about 2,600 items flowing through the process. So we've given you the opportunity to specify this. So on the left-hand side, we have got a information processing dropdown where you can tell the system that you want to take the sum of all of the inputs, the greatest, the least, or the average number of inputs against this action. In this case, I want to consider these three pieces of information as a single entity that I'm validating. So I'm going to use take the least information input. And you can see the number drops to 2,600. I have a missing duration. I haven't set how long this action takes, so I'm going to click here. And you can see this little toggle bar that is now saying we're using the input frequency, which is coming from the capture action. So at this point, all I need to do is specify the duration of this action. So we'll say 5 minutes. And you can see now the statement's changed so that it's green. But now I get to this break in my process where I have some valid accounts and some invalid accounts. And at the moment, you can see we have an equal number of both, and that just isn't correct. And so also against this action, if we scroll down in the properties, you'll see we have the percentage of information outputs created from this action. So I'm going to set this as 80% being valid and 20% being invalid. And you can see that the numbers have now changed. I have 2,080 valid accounts, and they flow all the way up here to this action. And I have 520 invalid accounts. And so now I'm going to come to my next action in this rework loop, which is fix the errors. And we're going to drop down again so that we can see the duration. I'm just taking the average of information inputs. There's only one, so that makes no difference. Here in my duration, you can see the frequency's been set. I can say how long does it take to do this particular rework, 10 minutes. And again, I have a split. So when I fix these errors, I still have some invalid and some valid. So once again, I can come down into my information output section, and we'll use the 80-20 rule again. We'll say 80% of the numbers that were invalid are now valid, and 20% remain invalid. So you can see we're controlling the numbers. We have got 104 that are invalid, and we have 416 which are valid. And so now we need to come up to our next action, research and fix the errors. You'll see my frequency has been calculated for me. I can say how much time is needed. And these 520 are recombined here, which is the original invalid total that came from our initial validation exercise. And finally, in this load into CRM, currently it's taking the average of the information inputs, which is why it's down at 1300, but we need it to be the correct number of inputs. So if I set that to the sum, you'll see that pops back to 2600. And once again, I can simply decide how long it takes to load this data into the CRM. That might just be 1 minute, and I can save. And so I have now created a model where the flow of the content through our process is controlled from a frequency perspective by making sure that we have set our capture and we have appropriately set the conditions for the actions. And this opportunity to say where information status or information error is occurring inside our process, and we can set these percentages of right and wrong, good and bad, allows us to very easily control the numbers based on rework. So that's all becomes automated for you if you use the input capture action frequency, and you maintain the percentage of information outputs, and then you think about the information processing option. You can still, if you need to, come into an action and you can override this, at which point you can define your own frequency for a particular action. That is perfectly valid. And in situations where you might contact the customer 7 times from a single record that lives inside the CRM, this is a perfectly valid thing for you to do, is to come and say, actually, I need to move away from the calculated value because of some exception. The advantage of doing it the other way, of using the calculated values, is I can now come down to my capture action and I could understand the impact on my process if the volume of work was to increase. So simply by setting the percentage to 200 across all of these information output numbers, you'll see that my figures double through my model immediately. So if I had roles with capacity associated to these actions, we would immediately be able to reflect the impact that that increase in workload has on the roles performing those actions in our business. So I have a play with the action frequency and action duration settings and the information processing options that we provided for you to get very accurate data in terms of the workload that you're modeling in your digital twin.